So just to get something out of the way very quickly, I am of course aware that Dune Parts 1 and 2, the movie, are based off of a book, the book, that's been around for decades and decades and decades, that's inspired a lot of my favorite works. I'm aware that the book dives deeper into into the intricacies of the plot and the setting and the character psychology, and it just is obviously richer and has more to it, as books tend to be when it comes to comparing books to adaptations. However, in spite of that all, I simply do not have the time to read the book anytime soon. It's not on my priority list, and while as you'll see in this video, I am adequately, to put it lightly, adequately engaged to check out the book and the source and explore more of this universe. It isn't something that's on my list anytime soon, and it'll at the very least, at earliest, happen after I watch Part 3 in theaters. So yeah, just before any of that gets suggested, that's my take on it. It's not due to lack of interest. I am generally interested, but I am also adequately satisfied with the movie enough to be satiated, and I just have so much on my plate in terms of books and films and video games and manga and anime and TV shows and everything to get to in the short-term future. So yeah, just getting that out of the way. More importantly, sorry for that long aside, as you can tell by the title of this video and what I've just said, I have finally watched the films for Dune Part 1 and 2. I've been told for years and years by people who know the series I like, the type of character writing and worlds and thematic storytelling I enjoy, that Dune would be super up my alley for both the movies and the book. And it's not that I ignored that or didn't take it into account, but it just wasn't something that was on my agenda. For any given reason, I don't know, I just couldn't get around to it. But finally, I did. Actually, over the past few days, I literally rolled the credits on Dune Part 2 a few minutes ago. And I really, really, really enjoy it. I think it's fantastic. I'm just gonna kind of give some thoughts here about my impressions on it. Sorry if it's gonna be very scattered. I'm sure you expect that when it comes to this channel. But, yeah. How do you sum up this film? I just put out a sort of media thread tweet that said, fascinating, emotional, epic, rich, great character writing, unbelievable audio visuals. What more is there to say? Just an all-around incredible film and a new favorite. And that kind of sums it up. It's very emotionally compelling. I found myself very emotionally engaged. It is epic. The scale is unreal. The audio visuals, the direction, the way that the score so beautifully complements the flow of the story and the structure of the story and the stuff that's going on, obviously. And how it syncs with direction so beautifully, and it's so rich. It strikes a really nice balance, at least in the films, because the world and the political conflicts are actually not super complex. Not to me. I don't think so. At least maybe they are in the book, but it's relatively simple. There's this universe or this setting. Which there are lots of planets, and there is one planet in the whole known universe that supports spice, which is the most important resource, basically, in this setting. And so there's very often vies for power, power plays from different factions to gain control of it. Influence societally, economically, and the Empire, who obviously oversees all of this, often makes power plays, sometimes influenced by religious factions or selfish needs or whatever throughout history. Sometimes, I don't know, I would assume that at some point in history there was some control of the spice, that was at least intended to be, I guess, well-intentioned. Sorry, I'm stumbling over words a little bit. But in this specific time period, the Empire is incredibly corrupt, and the planet that um, man that has this spice is called Arrakis. And there are lots of different families, noble houses that vie for this power and who are given control of it. And sometimes that's a political play with lots of, it's very Games of Thrones esque, A Song of Ice and Fire. If you're thinking more modern, kind of almost Succession like, political mind games and power plays, and it's fascinating. I eat that stuff up. If I'm thinking about video games that do that, another example is like Final Fantasy 14 or Final Fantasy 10 or Final Fantasy 12, stuff like that. So it's what I like about that is that it's the setup and the premise is not too hard to grasp. It's pretty simple to grasp, and it makes it a very approachable sort of blockbuster series. But there is such great density and richness and complexity that springs off of the little details from it. The ramifications and side effects and how they affect people, and the Bene Gesserit and how they are so intertwined with this, with their plan, and it just leads to great character moments and lots of great emotional storytelling and conflicts that are super rich and intriguing and just really juicy. And yeah, it's super up my alley. But my main point is I like how it's approachable, and for people who aren't too interested in that sort of thing, it doesn't take a lot to grasp it, and you can pay more attention to the, I don't know, the other stuff that you might be into. But for people who love digging into that, there is a lot of density there. I've spent the last few days reflecting on the setting and the just how much there is. And oh god, sorry. I opened a stream on one of my tabs. Sorry about that. That was Hannah. And it's just really incredibly well done. So, but with that aside, the setting aside, overall, the audio visuals for both films, everything that I said, I essentially mean for both films, because I think of it as one big story that's 5+ hours long, that's had to be divided into two because of, obvious reasons. But if we're talking about my impressions of both films, it's interesting, because I went into Dune Part 1, and I'm like, you know what, I'm taking the plunge. Let's do it. I want to engross myself in this world. I have a spare 3 hours this evening. Let's check it out. That was a few nights ago. And I didn't watch it in the evening. I watched it in the afternoon. Either way. And some people, a lot of things I saw and a lot of things I'd heard over the years is that Dune Part 1 is pretty good. But it's very slow. There are long stretches of nothing happening. It's quite dull. And basically, at the end of it, if you're at least a little invested in seeing where it's going to go, then the purpose of it is to just get you to lay the foundation for Part 2, which is where the real story begins. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's not too far from the truth of what I've heard. It's interesting to me because I watched Part 1 and I really enjoyed it. Everything I just said about the setting applies to Part 1. I thought that the cast was not incredible, but I think there was a lot of incredible foundations laid. Audio visuals, and just unbelievable. And I think it just does a great job at introducing the world in a way that is gradual, in a way that is not overwhelming, and in a way that I guess, more than anything, engages you. And to me, not a single minute did I find myself bored by this. I was enthralled at understanding how this world functioned, at looking at the incredible visuals and how these planets are portrayed, at the super interesting cast and different personalities and factions, and just, I was enraptured. I really, really was. And while, nothing... Well, there are fireworks. There is a whole complete sacking of a noble house, and there are deaths. But by and large, I understand what people say when it's meant to be sort of the introduction to the world, because it's more or less true. But in spite of that, it's slow moving for a lot of it. There is stretches where maybe not a ton is happening on screen, but there is so much that is simultaneously spinning the wheels on and off screen. And there's always like 3 or 4 threads at least that you're thinking about in the back of your mind as other things happen. It is such an immediately engaging story to me that I was not for a single second bored. I didn't find any of it dull, and even in the sequences where maybe I could have been having my mind wandering if I don't know if I didn't get enough sleep or something, the visuals, oh my god, they were always there to capture my attention. So yeah, part 1 I thought was really good. Though I did mention just now that in part 1 the character writing isn't great yet. I think it's good, I think it's solid, but you don't really dig into why these characters are super interesting until part 2 for me. But that doesn't stop it from being awesome. But in part 1, I would say, sorry, I just got IMDb on. Let me just load up IMDb on the side here. In terms of the cast, I think there are some standouts that are worth mentioning. Shawnee's not really present for most of it. She's just kind of shown in visions and right at the end, so I'll talk about her in a bit when I talk about part 2. Duncan's cool. I really like Stilgar. I think he's interesting. Dr. Yue was cool. I did end up feeling quite sympathetic for him in spite of what he does. But I think the characters that for me stole the show were Reverend Mother Mahiam, the head mother of the Bene Gesserit, beautifully played by Charlotte Rampling. Just incredible poise and weight and gravity to portraying this incredibly corrupt matriarch, I guess you could say, the core of it all. I liked Gurney as well, but who stole the show for me was the Reverend Mother Mahiam. I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry. Stellan Skarsgård's really awesome Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who just sheer presence. He just has incredible aura and screen presence and beautifully acted. And Jessica I found really interesting through her tug and war with her duty and her love and all the things that she loses and her love for her son and how she juggles that with her faith in the Bene Gesserit, which she's been essentially indoctrinated or forced into dogma for. I found that really interesting. And, but my favorite character was Duke Leto, Oscar Isaac's character, who I think actually has the most character work that is present on screen in part 1. I think he was my favorite character. I think he was very clearly meant to be an early story character, but he does the job really, really well. Now, I did find myself thinking that if by the end of this he is my favorite character at the end of all 3 parts of Dune, something's wrong here. But already that changed. Part 1 has a low ceiling for the character work, but he is a very good character for what he is, and I really enjoyed him, and I find him very sympathetic and good, and a great sort of like Ned Stark-esque, Thor's-esque from Vinland Saga sort of character to... By the way, this is spoilers, full spoilers for Dune. We're entering it now, if you couldn't tell already. To sort of just exist in this first part and sort of define the world and define the tone and the type of conflicts that are going on and the relationships. He just does a great job with all that, I thought. And now, obviously, I haven't mentioned Paul Atreides. He's the main character, of course, and there's no way I could not mention him. But what's interesting about Paul to me is that I really enjoyed what was set up for him in part 1, but all the stuff that was set up for him in part 1, I found didn't intrigue me or super compel me or engage me in part 1, but more so engaged me for what was to come. I had immediately really high stakes in Paul as soon as I understood the stakes of what was going on with him and what was set out for him, but in part 1, I never found him all that fascinating. And I think that's okay, because I don't think he's meant to be. it was more for part 2 and onwards where I thought that Paul would really come into his own as a really awesome character. And spoiler alert, he did. But in part 1, I don't know if you guys know what I mean, but he's not a hugely impressive character, even though I have huge stocks in him. Not a flaw at all. I think it's just the way the story's written. But yeah, that was part 1. I thought it was great. Part 2? I went into part 2 actually being a little bit trepidatious, a little bit, wondering if maybe I just like part 1 and I won't like part 2 as much. Maybe I won't love it as much as people do, because everyone says part 2 is this incredible achievement, that is, significantly better than part 1. Maybe I'll disagree because I like part 1 so much, is what I was thinking. But, man, part 2 is such an achievement. I already talked about all the things it does incredibly, but the emotions enhance even, the emotions enhance even more. The character work super comes into its own. My god, the characters in part 2 are just so good. Sorry, iTunes is being overwhelming right now. The character work is so exponentially ramped up, and the themes and the world expands, and all these characters are added to it. Florence Pugh's character, Princess Irulan? Isla? Is that his sister's name? I need to check. Is her name Isla? Alia. Such an interesting concept for a sibling, for Paul, and a daughter to Jessica. We have Austin Butler's character, Fade Rotha, who is, again, I don't think the ceiling's super high for his character, but he does what he needs to do. He's well acted, he has incredible presence, he's very sort of warrior mentality in a way I enjoyed. The Emperor, from Christopher Walken, really, not a huge amount of screen time, but I loved his presence in the story. And Lady Margot Fenring from Lea Seydoux, who might be mispronouncing, sorry, who, again, not a lot of screen time, but I was fascinated by. So all these additions to the cast were huge successes to me, even if not, well, I guess Fade Rotha was quite central, but you know what I mean. Even if none of them were like hugely important, I guess outside of Fade Rotha, they all play very important roles. You can tell exactly why they're there, all their dynamics. It's just really smart, clever building of the story, building outwards, building upwards, fleshing out things, and these characters and this cast, this cast and this casting does such a great job with it. Sorry. But then the star of the show, who is in part 1, like I said, but isn't really a huge presence, a huge character, despite the visions of her, is Johnny, and I adore Johnny. She may be my second favorite character. I thought she's beautifully played by Zendaya. Actually, I think my favorite Zendaya role, that I've ever seen her in. She has this incredible heart and this beautiful spirit, and her relationship with Paul, I think, is incredibly endearing, and with her people is very, very beautiful, which is why it's heartbreaking to see where things go for her. I think, to me, she is, as we see these characters who we are invested in, like Paul and Jessica, and even someone like Stilgar, sort of lose themselves. And as we see the former heart, I think, one of the hearts of the series, of the story, Leto, is gone now. Because of all that, I feel like the story did need a very key emotional center, and I think that's Shawnee. To me, that's Shawnee. I think she's an awesome character, and I am so hoping for her to have some happiness. going forward. I don't know if she will. I have no idea what happens in part 3. But man, the way they establish her and flesh her out and then leave us forlorn for her at the end, it's so well done. But what really struck me about part 2 is how all the foundations outside of the character work, all the foundations are paid off, and not in a happy way. This is a horrifying story to me. I've kind of alluded to that already. This is a terrifying story. It is so disturbing, it's so upsetting to see what these characters go through. This is very incredibly real stuff that hits home. This systematic oppression, this embedded, manufactured culture and religion that is so predatory, that I'll get into in a second. And then those who are kind of at the whims of what's been set into motion, because it's so systematic, because it's almost inevitable that they fall prey to it. It just, wow, it was so it was so shocking to me at how well they pull off this premise. I guess I'll get into the two characters I'm primarily talking about. I'll say Stilgar. Stilgar, I think, is very likable as a sort of introduction in part 1 to the Fremen. And he's very core to his values and the culture of the Fremen, but he's also very open. He's welcoming enough to be likable and almost a guide into the Fremen culture. And I really enjoyed him in part 1, and I think it's sad what happens to him in part 2 because he just kind of becomes overcome by his creed and by the beliefs that have been fed to him, by that dogma, until he's almost unrecognizable to me. And he just becomes someone who, I guess, perpetuates. He's an example of how far the Fremen who get introduced into this film as this, I guess, tribe of people who are very sympathetic because of what they've gone through throughout history for being so closely tied to the spice on Arrakis and being oppressed and being subjugated and just dismissed and dehumanized because everyone in the universe wants to get their hands on the spice. It becomes scary. They become a force of nature, of a monolithic, faceless force of nature that perpetuates this incredibly scary, dogmatic, cult-like belief in a god, rather than a group of heartfelt individuals, which is what they felt like at first to me. And Chani, as she comes to sort of realize that over time, as they pour themselves into Paul being this savior, this chosen one, this messiah, is so heartbreaking because she's losing both Paul and her family, her home at the same time. She's losing everything. And where she goes from here, I don't know. So that was Stilgar, but it was so upsetting to me to see Jessica, who, by the local Reverend Mother here, or the planet Reverend Mother, whatever, loses herself to the water of life. If that feeds into Alia, and she comes back to life because of her training. Jessica does, but she is changed after this. It's almost like she locks into this hive mind of Reverend Mothers in the past. I don't know how many, but the warm, conflicted mother from part 1, who loved Paul, but was also so tied to her teachings in a very sympathetic way, is no more to me. I think she becomes replaced with something of a hive mind, with the aesthetics and outward mask of Jessica, but I think that Jessica seems to be gone. I could be wrong, but who knows? And it's really sad to me. Really sad, as she stops viewing her son as a son and more as a commodity, as a stepping stone for what he is meant to become, for his fate. It's a rough one. And then Paul himself, wow, he, because of what he goes through here, he instantly became my favorite character in Dune. immediately, even before he awakens to everything, I immediately found his journey to finding himself and his place within this culture super fascinating and really emotional and really engaging. And I felt such empathy for him because you can tell he's searching for a place to be, that he maybe hasn't felt that way before, even with his noble house, kind of like he was searching for something, even back at home. And so he finds himself here, and he doesn't want to be their savior. That isn't what he's looking for. He thinks of it as hogwash, perpetuated by the Bene Gesserit, but he, at the same time, wants to ingratiate himself within. He wants to protect these people. He cares for them. And Chani realizes that, and that's why they strike up such a intimate relationship, such a touching relationship. So, well, it seems quick. There is a bit of a time skip, but, you know. And it's so beautiful to see him find his place here. I also found it a bit sad, because there's a moment where he takes his ring off, his family ring, and he's talking to his late father, saying, "I found my path." And I found it very conflicting, because it's beautiful that Paul's found this path. I feel so much for him, but how sad that at the same time he feels like he has to repress his Atreides roots, his family life, and what his father represented for him, to do so. He takes his ring off, he puts it away. And in addition, when he gets named and formally brought into the ranks of the Fremen, he is named Muad'Dib Usul, are two names given to him, and that is, he's said to be Paul Usul Muad'Dib, or some variation of that. There's no Atreides there anymore. And I found that to be a bit of a red flag, that things were maybe not going down the right path, because Atreides is forever a part of him, and I think to erase it is to erase... It didn't feel in tune with the themes of the setting and of the story, for him to erase this part of himself, for that name to go away, for the ring to be put away like that. So I found myself a bit concerned about that. Just great audio. I'm not going to go throughout the whole film, just kind of some scattered thoughts I feel, but just the moment because things are ramping up and there's so much pressure on him to become the savior, the name escapes me. Lisa, I don't remember what it's called, but to become the hero, become the savior, the messiah. Because of all that, he feels such pressure, and I feel so sorry for him, and he kind of cracks and goes over the edge and consumes the water of life, which essentially, from what I can understand, grants him access to not just the bits of future sight that he's been seeing throughout the two movies, because of his connection, because of the way he's been genetically engineered to be this whatever he is, by the Bene Gesserit. Not just that he sees these visions that are exacerbated by the spice, but he sees the past, he sees several versions of the future, he essentially sees everything. He sees all paths, all the different paths that time can go. He sees all of the past of every person he comes into contact with. He just has to sort of flick a switch and it comes to him. And being overwhelmed with all of that information and the implications of it immediately, instantaneously changes Paul into someone who is, I think, hardened, weathered, and cold. Because how can you not be when you are exposed to that sort of information? He sees all the horrors of the world. He sees all the incredibly awful fates to come. And think about the implications of what he sees. He sees all of his loved ones dying and being born at the same time. And himself, he knows all the secrets of everything. And his goal is to lead this world into a future that, I guess, essentially subverts and avoids catastrophe and annihilation for their people, for the Fremen and for himself. And and all that. And he's found, it seems like, one path, but that path seems to be incredibly destructive. It seems to lead to the holy war that's been a warning this entire time. And that path just so happens to intersect with two of the most heartfelt characters in the story, Paul and Jessica, losing themselves. They are lost. And not only has Paul, because of this, the beautiful relationship he struck up with Shawnee, he feels this love, he acknowledges this love he has for her, but he can't express it anymore in this state. Not really. And he, for the sake of this, the path involves marrying the princess, Florence Pugh's character, and essentially just tossing Shawnee to the side because that's what this entails. And my God, her expressions in seeing all this come to pass, oh, my heart goes out to her in losing her beloved, in losing her people, who essentially just become this cult. And what kills me is the core of this is this predatory opportunism and this hubris from the Bene Gesserit. Who, for thousands of years across bloodlines all over the universe, have planned this out. And it's just so genius how this all comes to be, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and not in a certain way. So yeah, they manipulated... I just have a bit of a note about this. The Bene Gesserit manipulated bloodlines and houses to form their chosen one, but what's shown to us is Jessica did not buy into that. She did not want to go along with that. She valued her own happiness and individuality, and as a show of defiance, she had a son, from what I can tell, at the wrong time, with due to her desire for individuality and to be her own person, and to also express her love for Leto. As a result of this caused the Chosen One to appear, but maybe at the wrong period of time. Maybe a generation early, I believe it is. But because of this defiance made the Bene Gesserit, who have their hooks into the Empire, who have their hooks into everything, they are the be-all and end-all of this universe. This caused them to look at the Atreides household, and everything that goes on there, and be like, nope, they are too defiant. We cannot trust them as being as a faction to carry out our will, and they need to be eliminated. Leading to them colluding with the Empire, them colluding with the Harkonnens, which essentially destroyed the entire Atreides household in Dune Part 1. The only two survivors being Jessica and Paul, and Alia, I guess. And it's ironic because that cruelty and being like, no, they're too defiant, they're not going along with the tide, is actually the stimulus that leads Paul to wanting to enact vengeance in the way he does. It's kind of satisfying in that way, if it wasn't so horrifying for the characters we care about. It's gratifying to see these horrible characters, these horrible people in Part 2, punished, essentially. They commit such atrocities on screen and in history, and what they've set up, that it's gratifying to see, essentially, House Harkonnen erased. Good riddance. They are horrific. Although, there are some things, like, I genuinely appreciated the respect for and the warrior mentality and principles that Fade Rotha had, even though he was a horrible person in other ways. There were some interesting elements to them. I'm not saying House Harkonnen was badly written. To the complete contrary, I loved what they added, but there's a personal gratification to seeing them get what they deserve after all their horrific acts through the ages. So seeing them wiped out, seeing the Baron wiped out, what's his name? Rabon wiped out. It's gratifying seeing the Emperor and the Empire and the Bene Gesserit, the matriarch, at the whims of those who they oppressed, is satisfying on a level, but it comes at the expense of the people we care about and their happiness and their well-being, because I don't see this ending well. It feels like it's retribution, but it costs so much. And here's where we get to Paul, I guess, seeing the one path forward, seeing the path that leads to the answer. But I was thinking about this, and it reminds me of another story. I guess it's good to mention this now. I've talked about how it was said to me that Dune inspired a lot of my favorite stories. Tons of my favorite stories were inspired by it. But the two that came to mind the most were Final Fantasy X and Attack on Titan. Final Fantasy X, I won't spoil, but essentially through how the Bene Gesserit, through years and years of tampering and manipulation, installed these false prophecies to give a fragile, fabricated hope for people across the universe to give into, to then allow it to become a self-fulfilling prophecy that'll allow them to have their person at the core of everything to control everything. So they control everything. It's essentially a propagated, manufactured religious custom that over the generations becomes embedded as truth. It becomes truth for these people. And you see these people give into dogma, and it's frustrating, but when you're told this your entire life, and the people who told you that have been told that their entire life for generations, it is just, it's conditioning. It's hard to break out of that, to put it lightly. That is very similar to something in Final Fantasy X, and that's all I'll say. If you know, you know. Attack on Titan, it's essentially a comparison between, slight spoilers, I guess, the character of Eren and this turning point for his character where he very much changes and sees a lot of truth, and Paul. I would be shocked if Eren was not inspired by Paul, given seeing him now, seeing what it's led to, because there's this paradox here with Paul. It's so complex because everything he's doing is on this predestined path, apparently, that he sees that leads to the best outcome, but that still seems to be horrible. And it's weathered him so much, and it's taken all the life out of him and the heart out of him as he goes towards this, and undercuts his own heart for doing this, undercuts Chani, his relationships, as he sees the people around him, all these horrible outcomes for them and for himself, but has to go along it anyway because it's just somehow the best possible outcome? I don't know. I could be wrong, I'm just speculating, but there is no freedom there. He knows everything that is to come. He knows everything, every single step of the path towards this outcome that he wants to get to that is still incredibly negative. He is aware of it. So that means he has no freedom. He is just filling in the blanks that he already knows, following the steps that are laid out for him. There is no agency here. There's no free will here. He does not feel like an individual himself. He is just doing what is set out for him. And he's not an individual. He's just a tool. He is just fulfilling what history or the future, the prophecy, whatever he sees, dictates is the least horrible outcome. But it's still horrible. And so he loses himself in this. There is no freedom for him here. He is at the whims of what he set out for himself, but because he's following it, he has no agency. It's this paradox that is very Attack on Titan that I find fascinating. And it's just so beautifully integrated with the rest of the world and integrated in Paul. Because what I love about it is all the embedded religion, the disgusting stuff that the Bene Gesserit apply to this land, is fascinating, but horrible, immoral, to put it completely lightly. And Paul, upon talking to Jessica, I think after she has become overtaken, she says, we're giving them hope, and he says, that is not hope. And it isn't. This isn't hope. He's just going through the motions. I think before he yearned for hope, but not anymore. Not after he got exposed to all this. There's a holy war on the horizon, and he's fulfilling all those paths. I think he feels trapped to these outcomes and feels like he has to do this. It's not freedom. And I think to an extent he is tortured. There's a great line where the Emperor says, when speaking of Leto, that the heart is not meant to rule, and that's why he was weak. And that's a deliciously dark way of contextualizing Paul, because his heart is gone, but now he rules. He had to almost just carve out his heart and rip it out of himself in order to become the effective ruler that he needs to become. And it's horrible. It's so horrible. It's so emotional. It's so conflicting. Even talking about it now with you guys, I feel myself just heightening my appreciation for Paul as a character in this narrative. It's so good. It's so rich. He's a prisoner. He's a prisoner. And I guess that's... I've been talking for 40 minutes, but I guess that's all I kind of wanted to talk about in terms of my scattered thoughts. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I really enjoyed sort of... Like I said, I just finished the second movie, and I really enjoyed getting my thoughts together. And I can't wait for part 3. Actually what stimulated me to watch this, funnily enough, is I saw The Odyssey in theaters. Good film. And I like Dune better, for what it's worth. Dune together, part 1 and 2, better. But it was a good film. But I saw the trailer for part 3, and I had no clue what was going on. But I saw the trailer while waiting to see The Odyssey, but I loved the direction, I loved the vibes of the trailer, and I went, okay, I gotta watch Dune. So I finished The Odyssey, and a couple days later, I watched Dune. But so I'm so excited for part 3. I don't remember the trailer. I'm gonna watch it maybe after this, because I have no idea what that trailer even showed a few days ago when I saw The Odyssey, but I'm gonna check it out now. I'm so interested to see where things are gonna go. I cannot for the life of me see this story ending positively with a huge amount of hope, maybe some, but I think there's gonna be lots of death. I think there's gonna be lots of tragedy. I could easily see Paul's story ending in tragedy. What role will Aaliyah have? I'm so interested in that. I'm hoping for more interesting stuff for the new characters that were introduced. The Emperor, his daughter, Margot Fenring, Leia Seydoux, and yeah, continuing stuff. I liked Gurney in this as well. I liked Gurney in part 2. He was good. Continuing stuff for Jessica and Paul, of course, and Chani. Where does she go? Stilgar, my god. The evolution of Stilgar is so gutting. And yeah, I can't wait to see where they go. I think I remember Robert Pattinson being a new character in part 3, so that's cool. Bro is on a generational run. And more than anything, is there another path? Is it actually just set in stone? How does fate actually work in this universe, deterministically? Is it immutable? Is it impossible to reroute it, to find a different answer, to thread the needle to something that is unforeseen through the water of life for Paul? Or is it just set in stone? Are we meant to find meaning from within the gaps of these horrifying events that are to come, that have made Paul into this shell? I don't know, but I cannot wait. And if you can't tell, this has immediately become one of the series I'm most invested in. I love this shit. Anyways, feel free to... I've talked a lot about the story, and I came into it completely fresh and blind, so if I said anything that may be inaccurate, very possible, feel free to correct me, but please don't say anything that might allude to spoilers for part 3, or maybe to get into a discussion or debate about anything about part 3. If I'm wrong about something that will be corrected down the line, just let me be wrong and let me discover it on my own. Outside of that, though, please let me know what you think about the first 2 movies, and your thoughts on my thoughts and anything to do with Dune. Feel free. I love this. This is such a joy. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.